Now, to throw more light on Sri Lanka's economic woes and the way out of it, if possible, a very special guest joins us at this hour on WION World is One. I'd like to introduce Ranil Wickremesinghe, the leader of the United National Party in Sri Lanka and, of course, the former Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. He has decades of experience in navigating politics and understands Sri Lanka better than most. Thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
My first question to you. For weeks now, we at WION have been tracking the economic crisis in Sri Lanka closely. We've seen unrest on the streets, long queues for ration fuel, massive power cuts daily. Paper has run out for examinations. In your view, what has led to this crisis in the first place?
It's a breakdown of the economy, a mishandling of the economy. We knew from about 2 years back that the country will run into trouble unless you go to the IMF. The impact of tax cuts, which again reduced revenue, then the pandemic itself, which further reduced revenue, affected the balance of payments. It required us to go to the IMF in 2021 to obtain extended fund facility. We did not do that, and there were homegrown reports. As a result, the government's debt grew. The revenue reduced, so there has been printing of money. I think about 2.5 trillion rupees have been printed, which is big for Sri Lanka. We've had a shortage of foreign exchange, so you've got inflation plus the exchange shortage. And then the government central bank decided to float the rupee. The IMF asked for a gradual restoration of the flexible exchange rate, prevent any disorderly movement, and to do it within the framework, within the macroeconomic framework. But the central bank decided to just float the rupee, and the consequence of it has been the demand is growing, and the rupee is now somewhere at about 300 rupees a dollar, 350. It will certainly go up to 400. So then the shortage of foreign exchange meant that we have not been able to get the fuel. There's a ship outside harbour. The Petroleum Corporation has defaulted twice, and this is all leading to power cuts. Then there's no money to bring in paper for examinations. So all these hardships and the cost of living, hardships on the people have come to a point where they can't bear the hardships anymore. The explosion took place on Thursday at Pangilivatta, which was close to the president's house. Yeah.
So from what, I'm sorry to interject at this point, but from what you're saying that this is a classic case of mishandling of the economy. You saw it coming, other experts did too. Then the question, of course, that's on everyone's minds is, why was nothing done to avoid a crisis like this?
The issue is between the Monetary Board, the Treasury who has one view, and we who have another view. If you look at the IMF Article 4 consultation, the full report, the IMF staff is of the view, which has been endorsed by the Executive Board, that the problems of Sri Lanka arise from two issues, the balance of payment and the debt. And they have said the debt is unsustainable. But on the other hand, the Treasury and the Monetary Board, the central bank says that the IMF is pessimistic and that this is a temporary issue which will vanish once the foreign exchange evidences come in and the tourists return to Sri Lanka, where the second one will not happen in any case. So there is this difference of views. One says, don't go to IMF, we can find a homegrown solution. They haven't found a homegrown solution. They've caused a major economic crisis, which after Thursday has now become a political crisis.
So my next question, of course, to you is there a solution to the ongoing crisis? Many critics and insiders say that the government does not even have a plan in place to tackle the ongoing shortages.
Well, we've had a discussion with the government. I think the views are well known, what we've expressed. First, we've got to decide between this, you can't have a contradiction between the IMF and the central bank. In our view, we have to accept the IMF report and act accordingly. Secondly, that we should go up to the IMF with a full-fledged plan, which is possible to be worked out, at least the skeleton of it. Then you can flesh it later. The need for the budget to have a relook at the budget and may take it away from being a development budget into a budget that looks at social welfare and provides a safety net. The banks are very shaky. You need a safety net under the bank. So these have been given, but whether the financial authorities will carry it out is another question. The government seems to be unable to force the financial authority to carry out these instructions.
Let's talk about what's happening on ground, sir. There is an emergency in place. A curfew has been imposed. Soldiers have been deployed. People are planning more protests as we speak. Do you expect them to be peaceful after what we saw recently outside the president's house?
Well, there was a protest called out by some unknown organizations, and people are going to take part in it on Sunday. Though some of the political parties said we don't know who's organizing it, be careful. The main opposition party decided to get involved and to give leadership. That has created a rift between the organizers and the main opposition party. But more than that, the government thought, I think the government was worried that there will be a lot of groups coming out. So they have now used the emergency and imposed a curfew for Sunday. But despite, after the curfew, my feeling is that these protests will continue. Because what has happened is that the people have got onto the street and the government authority has been challenged. And more than that, the political parties and government and organized civil society, the main players in the political scene of Sri Lanka. But now the power is shifting away from them into these unorganized groups that are carrying out the protests. And they say, we don't want any politicians here. We don't know what the next step is. The whole political system is under threat.
Now, sir, we've seen anger rising lately against the Rajapakshas. The economic crisis has grabbed global attention, with the EU, the US and Germany expressing concerns about the emergency imposed. How will this impact the perception of the country?
No, I mean, this doesn't help us at all, the emergency. I think in the outside world, we'll take another negative view of Sri Lanka.
Let's talk about tourism now. It was one of the mainstays of the economy, a sector that was, of course, hammered by the pandemic. Now, with the world opening up, is there hope that Sri Lanka's tourism will pick up and help save the economy?
No, it will not pick up for two reasons. We didn't have a plan during COVID. Who are the tourists we are going to attract? And we should have really tried to attract the high-paying tourists, which is what Maldives are doing. Instead of which, they focused on Ukrainian and Russians, and the room rates have gone down by about 30%, 40%. Now the Ukrainians have stopped coming, and the Russians have stopped coming. Those who are here are being looked after by the hotels at their expense. Secondly, which means with the economic crisis, certainly the European countries have told the visitors to be careful of coming to Sri Lanka. I think the Indian visitors will also fall. No, there won't be any addition to tourists. There will be a shortfall.
Mr. Wickremesinghe, as a right. Please continue.
No, we put too much onto tourism. It had to be a medium-term plan. It couldn't have been a short-term one. And you're paying the price for it. Then, as a result of the Ukraine crisis, I suppose that's impacting on Sri Lanka. It only aggravates an existing economic problem. It is not the source of it. It just aggravates the existing economic crisis.
Mr. Wickremesinghe, as a former Prime Minister, you can give us insights into governance and crisis solving. What can be done at this moment to address the current shortages, from paper to diesel to even skyrocketing food prices?
I don't know how the system works, because apparently the authority, the political arm, doesn't seem to be able to control the bureaucratic arm, which is the authorities responsible for central bank and treasury. They haven't turned up in parliament, and I think next week they have been summoned. The notice has been given to them. Reports have not been made available. So there is a big disconnect, which means that thereafter what has happened is different ministries are acting on their own. They approach either the central bank or the treasury, and different directions are given. So but what I see is a sort of a very disorganized civil administration.
Absolutely, sir. Now let's talk about the neighbours. India, as we know, has been sending aid to Sri Lanka in this crisis, from rice to other crucial supplies. In fact, India also agreed earlier to provide the $1 billion credit line to help ease shortages. Tell us more about how this has helped.
Well, I think the Indian credit lines are helping. The first ship bringing in fuel will come in tomorrow or day after. But when the government sort of estimated the funds needed for fuel, they went on the basis of the old prices. Now the price has doubled. So this is one of the problems that we have to face. Secondly, the $1 billion ones will enable us to get certainly foodstuff, raw material, intermediate materials from India. It will last about a month to 5 to 6 weeks, I would say, not more than that. The problem is that there are goods items, intermediate items, finished items, raw materials which we can't get from India. We have to get from other sources. So you just can't access and find the funds, which means that number of enterprises are closing down, or there's a cutback. The Indians, certainly now they have been buying on the $1 billion credit line. So it will give us some relief for 6 weeks, but not on all sectors. Where you've been buying, purchasing goods, obtaining it from India, yes. Where you can find a suitable substitute, yes. Not for other areas. The government is now talking with China to get a similar loan. But
right.
Then what happens? You can get the raw materials and intermediate goods which you have been ordering from China. But then what you're ordering from India stops. On the other hand, there are intermediate finished goods, raw materials which you can't get from China or India. So those enterprises are further affected. That this is not a long-term solution. It seems to be a firefighting solution.
So my final question for you, as we all know, we live in a connected world. A crisis in one country affects others too. How does the economic instability in Sri Lanka affect its neighbours?
Well, your prices are holding up. You got affected by the Ukrainian crisis, but not that much. You are getting your oil cheap now from Russia. The first impact is that there have been a few Sri Lankans who have come over to Tamil Nadu. If the things get worse, there will be more people to come to Tamil Nadu. It may not only be Tamil, there may be Sinhalese also coming in.
Mr. Wickremesinghe, thank you so much for all those precious insights on this economic crisis. We'll, of course, continue to cover the situation on ground in Sri Lanka as we speak. Thanks so much for joining us on WION World as well.
Good night.